Last time on Low Budget Binge.
I once went to a serial killer convention on a lark a while back, and it was an extremely odd experience for me. It's not bad, just a little overlong and overwritten. You can count the number of good and scary voodoo hoodoo movies on one hand. The funeral is all set up, the food is set out, the guests are all here, but the corpse just won't cooperate. The killer has a sweet grappling hook. Sound like a familiar situation? Yeah, we're living it. Ah, Death Jr.
And now, the next death-defying chapter of Low Budget Binge.
Welcome back to ML Miller Frights, a part of the Kings of Horror Network. I'm ML Miller. While you might be watching this video on the Kings of Horror Network, I urge you to click over to my ML Miller Frights page and give it a like, share with your buddies across the electronic superhighway, click subscribe to this channel, and don't forget to ring that bell for notifications. Please get the word out to new folks so we can make the Kings of Horror Network, as well as ML Miller Frights, bigger and better. Low Budget Binge is where we venture down the paths less traveled and look at low budget, no budget, do-it-yourselves, and sometimes international films that never get that top billing you see in the usual Hollywood releases. I'll indicate in the review and down below where you can find these films along with their trailers. Return to Splatter Farm is new on DVD, on demand, and digital download from Wild Eye Releasing. It's directed by Jeff Kirkendall and Mark Polonia, and written by Kirkendall. 30 years after the farm got splattered, it changes ownership to a young girl and her friends who inherited the land. Upon arrival, it's clear there is something off with the place, but that doesn't stop the kids from partying hard and having the sex. Little do they know, Alan is still kicking around the farm, murdering and eating anyone who enters the property. While the original Splatter Farm showed the ingenuity of youth, Return to Splatter Farm highlights what director Mark Polonia, who shares the directing job with writer Jeff Kirkendall, has become in the interim. Polonia has led the way when it comes to schlocky, no-budget horror through the years, with over 60 films under his belt. It seems more energy was put into Return to Splatter Farm than most of Polonia's latest ventures. This seems to be a personal favorite of his, but that still doesn't mean it's good. It's not, but that's what makes it so much fun. Return to Splatter Farm is lo-fi goodness, and I know some of you love that sort of stuff. I myself try to separate the low-budget look from the love of the genre, and by doing that I found a lot to enjoy in this good, bad movie. This one is not for film snobs. Those who say, this is something I could have made, just won't get this one. The point is, you didn't make this. Polonia did, and he used everything he could to make it. For me, that's something worth crowing about. It's funny comparing the teenage-made Splatter Farm to Return to Splatter Farm, in that as kids, the Polonia brothers most likely weren't able to chat up local gals to be in the movie. They weren't the hunkliest of kids, you know. But Polonia, the adult, can toss a few bucks at some gals to lose their tops, and this modern sequel gets a lot of nudity that the Polonia brothers most likely only dreamed of. There are numerous gratuitous boobage shots here. Polonia lingers on these scenes almost as much as he does the in-your-face DIY gore. Return to Splatter Farm lives up to its name in terms of this, and it's still pretty rudimentary stuff, yet just as effective as it was in the original. There is some growth in terms of story and filmmaking with this newest installment of the epic story of Splatter Farm. With so many films made in the interim, one would hope Polonia would pick up a trick or two. Still, Polonia maintains that no-budget quality that his films had all those years ago. I have to give it to Polonia. He makes film. Not necessarily good ones, but I was never unentertained by Return to Splatter Farm. The sheer love of horror and movie-making shines through all of the rough edges. Fans of lowbrow, lo-fi, and no-budget horror are going to put Return to Splatter Farm on their must-see list. Blind is new on DVD, on demand, and digital download from Uncorked Entertainment. It's directed by Marcel Waltz and written by Joe Netter. A Hollywood starlet named Faye, played by Sarah French, attempts to cope with a botched eye surgery which resulted in her becoming blind. While she tries to build a new life, she finds herself stalked by a killer wearing a Ken doll mask dubbed Pretty Boy. In occasions like this, I like to begin with the positive. Pretty Boy looks quite disturbing. The blank stare on the doll's face mask works most of the time, as Pretty Boy makes like Michael Myers around Faye's home. Much like the vacant stares of our blind heroine, Pretty Boy's lack of emotion makes him look downright menacing. The problem is that the silent masked killer is not necessarily a new shtick, but it seems filmmaker Marcel Waltz really wants to make Pretty Boy a thing without providing anything like a personality, a backstory, or even a modus operandi of the guy. Sure, he looks scary when he stands there and looks at Faye through the glass, but after the third or fourth time I saw that scene, I was asking what else does this guy have in terms of menace? The lackluster demasking at the end really doesn't help make this guy interesting, but kudos for the design and the first 2 or 3 times it is used effectively. Monotonous is a word, and it's a word I would use to describe Blind. The acting is fine from Sarah French. I preferred her recent role as the suspicious wife in The Special to this one. I also thought that though she's playing a rather annoyingly upbeat character, Caroline Williams, Stretch from the Texas Chainsaw Massacre Part 2, gives a really solid performance. But too much time is wasted in Blind on Faye gazing blankly out of her window, sauntering around her lavish mansion in the hills, and listening to songs by some I'll Be Sure wannabe. The film highlights at least 3 songs by this R&B crooner and plays the entire song just to push the runtime to droning lengths. The lead-in to Pretty Boy's confrontation with Faye is long and drawn out, and while he does kill a few people along the way, it all still feels so mundane and energyless. Pretty Boy lights up his secret pretty cave with lavish Christmas lights, and the scenes are gaudy and sleazy, but Waltz counters that with drawn-out and slow-panning shots that kneecap any unease the cinematography might imbue. Worse yet is the absolutely painful final moments written by Joe Netter, as Faye professes her affection to a lover, but it turns out to be Pretty Boy. This scene is hilariously overwritten with some of the schmaltziest monologue you'll see this night of a late-night Hallmark mystery movie. If the slow pace of the film hadn't driven you mad, these last moments will push you right off the cliff. Plus, on a storytelling level, the stakes are way off, as Faye really doesn't know she's in danger for most of the film. And that's right up until a few seconds before the film ends. Director Marcel Waltz has an eye for making things look lush and dreamy, and serves this up effectively a few times, contrasting the brutal moves of the killer. Unfortunately, that doesn't make up for the lumbering pace of Blind, and the multitude of scenes full of superfluous monologues, droning music, and long vacuous stares. Please skip this snoozer. Writer's Block is new on demand and digital download from Gravitas Ventures. It's directed by Jeff Kerr and Ray Spivey, and written by Kerr and Spivey. Craig Nye plays Skip Larson, a struggling writer, is there any other kind? An accomplished alcoholic who had one successful book followed by a lot of failed ones. After a mediocre signing at a bookstore, he is approached by a hired gun named Digger, played by Chris Warner, with an offer to come visit his employer, a famous author named Chester McGraw, played by Mike Gassaway. Chester wants to hire Skip to help him through some speed bumps he's having with his new manuscript, and is planning to pay a pretty penny for his work. But Chester's contract for Skip is detailed with some very specific fine print, and soon Skip becomes a prisoner at Chester's ranch, and the subject of much abuse and torture. When Skip attempts to escape the ranch, Chester goes native and begins hunting him with spears and guns in a most dangerous game scenario. I'm a big fan of stories about the process of writing. I consider myself a wordsmith, and any time a peek into the process of someone's writing style is available, I tend to pay attention. The best moments of writer's block occur when we get to pull back the magical curtain and see the perils and many downs and often dismal life of a writer. Skip is your typical cliché. He drinks too much and comes up with every excuse to do anything but write. The film does a good job at showing how hard it is to simply push oneself to write, as when you do so, it often is met with criticism, rejection, and depression. Filmmakers Jeff Kerr and Ray Spivey do a decent job of understanding how hard it is to become a writer and maintain a career as one. The problem I had with writer's block is that it lags very low in the middle. There are some interesting turns toward the end, The inciting moment is decent and interesting, and the setup to the Most Dangerous Game style hunt is peppered through, but in the end, none of that kind of craziness happens. I kind of wish that this film would have gone as crazy as it hinted at, with a primal Chester hunting Skip with spears on his property. This only happens briefly, and then we move on, so the potential is never really delivered. The magic of coming up with the decent ideas is never really explored. Skip has bad ideas until all of a sudden his ideas and pages are phenomenal. You never really see what is good or bad about this writing. And the main conflict, which is all about writing the story, really has very little action at all, and what does occur is often beyond what its budget can achieve. I would have loved to see some kind of parallel between the story Skip was writing, the situation he was in, and the metamorphosis required for him to become an accomplished writer. But this story, which lauds the writing of its leads and mentions cliches in every criticism, ironically isn't written well and is full of cliches. There's a hint of something decent going on in writer's block. The acting is okay, on par with this type of low-budget fare. The effects are pretty low-key as well, though there is a shot of a dead body that is actually pretty disturbing in how crude it looks. All in all, I wish they would have just pushed the narrative further and deeper, just as the lead was pushed to deliver a solid story. Sasquatch Among Wild Men is new on-demand and digital download from Uncorked Entertainment. It's directed and written by Darcy Weir. Those who have followed my reviews for a while now know that I want to believe in Bigfoot. I'm an avid viewer of YouTubes, but like the technically prolific Bigfoot Tony, Lynn Smith's narrative eloquence in Bigfoot Case Files, the heartwarming open-mindedness of Al Truist, and of course the peerless theories of Bob Gimlin, all of whom have dedicated their pages to dissecting evidence and presenting stories that leave it to the viewer to decide for themselves if what they see is real or not. I'll post those links to those channels below for those who don't actually already know them. Just when I think it's all a hoax, some new compelling story, piece of film, or bit of evidence shows up, and I want it to be real all over again. I want to believe that there are things out there that we have yet to discover, and some mysteries are still worth solving. If you feel the same, you're in for a treat with Sasquatch Among Wild Men. This documentary is based on the thesis that there was no singular shift from man to ape, with one species dominating the landscape as the sole hominid. It builds on this theory that throughout history, multiple stages of evolution functioned and lived among one another, and therefore, it's quite possible that some kind of primitive wild man might actually exist right now alongside humans. The theory is supported by footprint casting, video evidence, sound samples, and nesting areas discovered in spots where a large bipedal primate has been reported to be seen. The film supports the theory by talking with Bigfoot expert Dr. Jeffrey Meldrum, the owner of the most extensive collection of Bigfoot castings. Meldrum's extensive research and belief that Bigfoot does exist is supported by extensive scientific knowledge about the structure of human and ape feet. One of the more fascinating bits of the documentary has Meldrum explain the difference between how a human walks and how the foot would adapt to carrying such great weight and size on bare feet to create a similar but distinct foot structure seen in wild men across the world. I was less intrigued by the nesting reports from the Olympic Research Project simply because nests really aren't that exciting, though I understand why studying them would be. The sound recording segment was extremely interesting, as comparisons between known ape sounds and unknown sounds from reported Bigfoot-inhabited areas are made. The documentary spices the science talk up with some interesting clips taken by amateur photographers who say that the blurry image in the frame is, in fact, Bigfoot. These clips are relatively compelling, and ones that aren't really well known, though of course they don't offer any conclusive evidence. No conclusions are reached in Sasquatch Among Men, other than the fact that sightings of this creature occur around the world. If you're an enthusiast, I think you'll find this a fun watch and quite an informative one. If you don't believe, you'll find a lot to scoff at. Falling in between, as I do, I found it to be a compelling documentary worth checking out if you've left your mind open for the possibility of Bigfoot's existence. Finally, we have They Reach. It's new on-demand and digital download from Uncorked Entertainment. They Reach is directed by Silas Dahl and written by Silas Dahl and Bri Troyer. A spunky and intelligent young girl with an interest in science named Jessica, played by Mary Madeline Rowe, stumbles upon a tape player possessed by a demon. When she accidentally cuts herself and gets blood on the tape player, It reactivates the demonic presence and begins possessing her family. This leaves it up to Jessica, her possible future boyfriend Sam, played by Morgan Chandler, and her oddball gal pal Cheddar, played by Eden Campbell, to figure out how to dispel the demons and try to fix all of that damage they have caused in time for the spring dance. Yes, I know this sounds like a Goosebumps episode, and on one level, yes, this feels like a really good Goosebumps or Are You Afraid of the Dark episode. But despite the fact that the protagonists are teens trying to sleuth out a demon, there are some surprisingly adult things going on, including a ton of swears and a whole lot of goriness. Blood is smeared and spattered in all directions as demons attack friends, family, and random police. The story itself may focus on a younger crowd, but it's telling a story that feels much more sophisticated. Filmmaker Silas Dahl delivers a wonky adventure that feels like it's trying to be very Amblin-esque, and while it was made on a fraction of what those Amblin films were made on, it still captures the tone, as these kids are definitely in real peril. While there are tons of swears, it's nothing kids most likely don't already know. And while there is plenty of gore, it's pretty much just goop thrown in people's faces, and it isn't on the offensive or gratuitous side. I laughed quite a bit at They Reach. These kids talk like real kids. Mary Madeline Rowe is decent in the lead role of Jessica and makes a protagonist worth rooting for. I was thoroughly entertained by the off-the-wall antics of Cheddar, played by Eden Campbell, who sort of lives on a different plane than the rest of the people in the film. Out of all of the actors in They Reach, Campbell is the one I see rising to star status, as she has great comic timing and isn't afraid to do unorthodox things to get a laugh. They Reach even has some strong suspenseful moments that morph into some downright terrifying scenes. There are numerous scenes that will make you squirm and laugh at the dreadful lengths this film will go. While I found the end to be a bit of a cop-out, the film leading up to it was undeniably enjoyable. I think They Reach is a film horror fans young and old can enjoy together. That'll be it for today. Please chime in the comments and let me know what you think of this video, how on the nose or mind-numbingly wrong I am, or you can counter with your own review. If you like this video, please pound that thumbs up button. Share this video with your social media addicted pals. If you're looking for written reviews, you can find them on mlmillerwrites.com. Don't forget, I have 2 new horror comic book trade paperbacks you should look for. Grave Trancers is out right now, and Pirouette, collecting never-before-published issues, will be out in November 18th in only the finest of comic book stores. And be sure to subscribe to this channel and ring that bell for alerts to be the first to see my future videos. Thank you so much for your time, and take care.
You're doomed to live the life you're meant to be, stuck inside your reality. You're